All right, that got blurry. So let's do Fraction Busters number 2, and hopefully this stays focused. All right, if you are looking at x plus 2 and x as your denominators here, the common denominator is those two multiplied together. And I used an example in class where, hypothetically, if x was something like 17, to pick a weird number, if this was 17, then this number here would be 19. And so a common denominator for a 17 and a 19 would be just to multiply those two numbers together. So that's what our common denominator is. These two things multiplied together. And that way, when you get to each term, it will cancel. So this x plus 2 is going to cancel with this x plus 2, which we needed to do. And when you get to this term, this x will cancel with this x, which we needed to do. We need these denominators to cancel. And that's why we need both things here. Okay, so our common denominator times this first term, the x plus 2's wipe out. And we're left with this x and this 4x, and that's 4x squared. Then our common denominator, which I'll write over on this side, times the next term, the x's cancel. And I'm left with this 7 and this x plus 2. Now it's actually negative 7, and it's that negative that causes problems. So be aware. Negative 7 has to be distributed here. So negative 7x and minus 14 when you distribute the negative 7 to that remaining part. And then finally, the common denominator, don't forget it was this, multiplied by 3. Now nothing cancels here, so we just put that 3 right next to it. That means multiplication. So 3 right next to our common denominator is what that turns into, which we're going to distribute. And if I do that right now, I get that. So we got another quadratic. We're going to show proper factoring. So let's bring everything over to this left side. So it looks like we're going to end up with just an x squared and a minus 13x and a minus 14. And we dive in to factor that. Looks like we get an x minus 14 and an x plus 1. So we're looking at 14 and negative 1. Okay, let's see if we can slide this, keep it focused. To number 3 here on the same ditto. Common denominator is going to be the x and the x minus 2 multiplied together. I don't need to have x squared. A lot of people think that you need to have x squared since there's an x and an x, but one x will suffice. That's all we need. That x will cancel when we get to that term, and that x will cancel when we get to that term, so we don't need to have it twice. All right, common denominator, those two multiplied together. Here we go. First term, the x minus 2's cancel, and I'm left with that 3 and that x, giving me 3x. Next term, the x's cancel, and I'm left with this 2 and this x minus 2, and it's actually negative 2. So negative 2 I'm going to distribute to save a step here. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x, and negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. This 2 has nothing to cancel, so I just put it right next to my common denominator. And this last term, again, the x's cancel, and I'm left with a negative 4 that has to be distributed, negative 4x plus 8. All right, let's distribute here. And now let's bring everything over to the right side. So 0, 2x squared, that's nobody to combine with. That's negative 4x, that's negative 4x, that's an x, which you got to bring over, so negative 9x. And that 4, which you have to bring over, turns that 8 into a 4. Bring everything over to the right side. Factor 2x and x in the front. Looks like we're going to do a 4 and a 1. There's my 8 and a 1. That'll get me a 9 if they're both negative. So x is going to be a half. X is going to be 4. And we are there. All right, that's Fraction Busters.